Hello, good evening, friends. Today, the homeopathy for humanity people here again, and here is my colleague Basasun. He is from Israel, and I am Dr. Sanjay Solanke from Central India. So today we will be coming with this characteristic symptoms of Bönninghausen, uh, almost concluding part. Right. Over to you, Tikwa.
Well, we're going to see if we can conclude it today, but we might not conclude it today. Let's see how long it runs. Okay, so we have been through Bönninghausen's characteristic value of a symptom, and we have the verses as following: Quis quid ubi quibus exilius cur commodo quando. And today we are on Komodo. Komodo is basically the mode of the mode, and that would mean the modalities. So this is modality, but not the modality of time, which belongs to number 7 in our hexameter. Okay, from its etymology means word meaning. This proposition excellently describes the essence and the scope of the question before us. For the word modus is in the old classics not only refers to the manner and mode in general, but also to all the modifications which can take place in anything, thus the measure, the rule, the aim, the relations, changes, etc. Thus, whenever, with the exception of time, which is included in our last question, quando, possesses the ability to produce a modification, aggravation, or improvement with the patient, naturally belongs, according to the usage of this language, to this rubric. This question has a double importance to homeopathy. First, because it was discovered and developed by homeopaths, and is therefore their indisputable and exclusive property. And secondly, because all the results of provings and of experience, without exception, belong to the more or less characteristic signs of which no one has a matter of indifference, not even those of a negative kind. Okay, so here when we are in this segment, Bönninghausen's telling us that the proving data has furnished for us characteristics of modification and therefore the modalities. So this is the segment about the modalities. He says that the modalities that are furnished for us and the modalities that are the negatives will also be important, which we will see a little further on in the article. And that's where the idea of polarity comes from. And for those people who are using polarity analysis, this is why we get that polarity at the bottom of our repertorization in our analysis. Okay. Allopathy has never given general attention, which might have been of use to therapy, to these momenta, modus, quomodo. You see there's that same root word of mode. Mode also means style. So the word style, the style of how things happen, is important here. Okay, so these moments have not been important to the allopaths, and they belong specifically to the homeopaths. At least in its manuals in pathology, therapy, and materia medica, contain nothing of importance on this subject in allopathy. Homeopathy, on the other hand, soon after its discovery, recognized its great therapeutic value, and we find the first but already clear traces of it in Hahnemann's Fragmenta De Viribus Medicatorium Positivus, which appeared in the year 1805. But during the progressive development of our science, its importance appeared more manifest, and it was soon declared to be indispensable, so that in the later provings, the attention was more and more directed upon it. So as people started to use homeopathy, and as Hahnemann developed homeopathy, everybody noticed that the modalities were of the utmost importance. The most important. Bönninghausen is saying that the modalities are the most important, not the mind, not the this, not the that, but the modalities give us true characteristics. And this is where people get the idea of a Bönninghausen method, which isn't really a method per se, because it's an organon-based idea, to have when, where, how, all that is very much rooted in the organon. So it is not a method in and of itself. But this book here with this essay written by Bönninghausen is, I really think, the root of what people call the Bönninghausen method, to focus on the modalities as primary. Okay, so where were we? Indispensable provings, yes. So as provings continued, more and more attention was paid to the modalities. Hahnemann talks about it, that when you're doing a proving, that what you need to do is when there's like a pain or a situation that happens during the proving, to try different things and to see whether it makes it better or whether it makes it worse. So the prover is literally, if they get like a cramp in their elbow, they're supposed to try doing different things and laying down or sitting down or standing up. They're supposed to try doing a whole bunch of different activities to try to get those modalities. On this account, the later provings are the more complete, with the exception of those made by Hahnemann in the Materia Medica Pura, which were elaborated with special industry and on account of their constant use accompanied with copious notes. Okay, so Hahnemann, he's saying that Hahnemann was very careful when he did provings to try to ascertain the modalities. As I just mentioned in the organon, he talks about doing the different things of what might make things better, what might make things worse, and also in the Materia Medica Pura in the directions, because that is very, very important, the modalities. So you see, modalities do not belong only to Bönninghausen and Bönninghausen method, because there really truly is no Bönninghausen method per se, but this is simple Hahnemannian homeopathy, to look very carefully at the modalities. Okay, continuing. If we compare the lists of symptoms of the medicines, which have been proved somewhat fully, even a superficial survey will show that we find in almost every one of them the general indications of almost every disease: headache, colic, pains in the chest, diarrhea, constipation, as well as dyspnea, pains in the limbs, fever, and cutaneous ailments, etc., are in no case quite absent. But if we study these indications somewhat more closely, with respect to the special parts of the body and the different sensations, then indeed differences will appear, and we frequently discover symptoms which appear more or less frequently in one remedy and are totally lacking in another. But the number continues too large to bring the decision to a sure and indubitable point. And we soon feel the need of securing additional points in order that we may find the true and suitable simile among the competing medicines. But the Quomodo and the Quando generally solves the riddle in the most satisfactory manner, and not only removes every doubt, but also furnishes the proof for the solution, which we may have before supposed to be the right one. Okay, so this is an interesting point. He
You,
says,
this is for the students also, even for me. Can you just make those difference between Komodo and Kondo?
what's the difference between Komodo and Kondo?
Hmm.
As we see here, Kondo is going to come up in about another page, and Kondo means when. That is the modality of time. Komodo is modalities in general, and then Kondo is specifically a time-related modality. And then when we combine the Komodo and the Kondo, then that way we have a sure thing that we are sure of what our medicine is. Before that, we might have a list, and that list, we're going through it, and we have the symptoms, and then we're finding out which symptoms have coverage. Remember, this is about coverage. This isn't about themes or ideas, it's about symptom coverage. So when we're doing our analysis and we've selected, let's say, 7 symptoms, and we want to make sure that we get the best coverage in a medicine. And in order to be sure of that coverage, we want to have the modalities, because modalities furnish a special point. It's just like how he says in quiz, who is our patient? In item number 1 in this lovely essay, he says that when we have a changed mental state, we can use the quiz of the changed mental state, and with that change that happens during illness, for example, if somebody becomes irritable during illness, then we can thrust aside everything that's on our list that don't have irritability in the proving data. So we're matching proving data to the symptoms of the patient for the best coverage possible.
A very important part, especially differentiating the remedy. Right?
Right, and it's best to go to the proving data itself. Okay, where did our screen share go?
Back on.
That in such investigations and comparisons, we must also, as in what precedes, occupy the special standpoint is a matter of course. It is not sufficient to merely consider motion in general in contrast with the rest of the body or in the most affected part. We must also consider insipid and continuous motion, as well as the different kinds and degrees of motion. For example, like bending forward, bending backwards. The same applies to laying down. We must not only consider the kind of position, for example, on the back, on the side, doubled up, horizontal, etc., but also aggravation or improvement in the parts affected by lying on the painful part or the part not painful. All this is to be found out accurately and adapted to the remedy. Okay, so things like the different types of motion are very important, as are things like laying down, sitting, rising from a seat. There's just countless modalities, modalities of extending from the location, how something moves. Yesterday in the group, somebody mentioned about they have somebody who has edema that rises up. So that rising up from the bottom is a modality. So there are so many different types of modalities. Sanjay, do you think you can add a couple more?
motion is there, then we talk about extension, action, about you can see of parts, neck, arm, right? And
Yeah, so go ahead, sorry.
then about motion, you can take motion.
Yep, so all the different types of motions, the rising from a seat, sitting
Or
down in
you can say lying down or standing or sitting, walking, right?
Yeah, you remember sometimes in the proving data, it talks about when the left foot is extended during a step. Remember we had that last week in the proving data of Argentum? Right, so all those modalities relating to movement. And now, this is where we get the modalities of food and drink. Quite a prominent part in this rubric is occupied by the partaking of food and drink. And this not only in diseases of the digestive organs, but also in fevers and other internal and external affections. So, for example, in a fever, if somebody craves lemonade, we might be looking at belladonna or perhaps arsenicum, or maybe perhaps a few more. Okay, so food and drink that is changed during the illness is important. Remember, Bönninghausen is always talking about during the illness. It could be that the illness started 5 years ago. So people need to be able to try to think back. But the things of like what people like to drink or how much they like to drink or their cravings and their loathings are very important,
Or is
particularly
it,
in
or
the
is
acute.
it about suppose uh, talking about food and drinks? Here is talk about movements, right? Now he's talking about food and drink. Is it this food and drink which should take or shouldn't take during sickness? Or it's about are you able to have that or food during sickness?
Yes, it's about having the food or the drink during sickness. It's about aversions, it's about cravings, it's about quantity. For example, there's lots of rubrics about, there's lots of, symptoms of people who get full very quickly or people whose hunger is not satiated through eating a normal quantity. And then there's different types of drinks. For example, craving coffee is particular. Drinking water fast or drinking water in sips. There's a lot of different things. These are all modalities of food and drink. It's not only about what agrees and what disagrees. Okay. Here it is not so much the amount of appetite or thirst, but which also allopathy in some cases gives a proper importance, but especially the dislike or the desire for particular kinds of food and drink. And more especially, also the change of condition after partaking of one or another article of food that often gives the most important hints as to the medicine to be selected. For example, alumina feels worse after eating potatoes. And you have
Or
things like,
sugar in Symptom nitric. Yeah, sweets.
yep, so when we find the different things in the proving data, that belong to our patient. For example, like Kelly Carb feels worse after eating pancakes. Or there's different, farinaceous foods, things made out of flour. Or people who can't eat fat food, like eating a lot of oily food or deep fried food or a lot of spicy food. All this belongs to the modality of food and drink. And so we're looking at the cravings and the loathings and then how food makes people feel. Let's continue with the reading. All experienced homeopaths have therefore always given the greatest attention to this subject. And it is very much to be desired that whatever different persons have discovered in this direction should be collected and published. Okay, so Bönninghausen is reminding us again that what we notice that happens like as a cured symptom or whatnot in our patient or our experiences need to be collected and published for the greater good. It was mentioned above, continuing, it was mentioned above in passing that even negative signs, so far as they belong to this rubric, should not be neglected.
What
An
is negative
example.
science?
Hmm?
What is negative science?
That's what he's going to tell us. This is where we have a polarity if we use polarity analysis. And we're going to touch upon this right here in this sentence. He's going to give us an example. An example will show best what is meant by this. When a patient for whose condition pulsatilla seems suitable, according to the 5 preceding questions, feels best while at rest in a warm room, while he feels uncomfortable in the open, cool air, and also is fond of fat foods and bears them well, or offers other particularities which are in conflict with the characteristics of pulsatilla, this would give us an urgent cause to doubt the applicability of it to his case, and to look for another remedy, which also in these points corresponds with the symptoms. So if we're thinking that we're going to give somebody pulsatilla, but they feel better in a warm, stuffy room, and it feels worse in the open, cool air, and likes to eat fatty food and can digest them easily, these are in conflict with pulsatilla in general, and these are negative signs. And that tells us that we should try to cover the symptoms with another remedy and not pulsatilla. And then he says, I'm sorry that the space for these contributions, which anyways may seem to have already been greatly exceeded, does not permit me to enter more into detail on one or another matter belonging to this division, as I may openly confess that I consider the indications obtained from this and the following questions as the most important. Indubitable means without a doubt. You see the word doubt in there? Indubitable. Without a doubt is the most important, and therefore the decisive ones for therapeutical purposes. Even the numerous class of reflex actions, almost all of which fall into these 2 rubrics, do not by their internal contradictions diminish this importance as soon as we know their mutual value and are therefore enabled to estimate the worth of each. Yep, so Bönninghausen
I have seen talking about talking talking about position of the lying or sitting, walking, and also talks about polarity, right?
Yep, the negative signs call into question whether or not we should give the remedy. And that depends on a number of different factors. Because occasionally we need to give a partial stimulant because that's the best we can do. But in other cases, we want to look for a medicine that doesn't have contraindications. And so this here, this Komodo, has to do with the mode, the modalities, and the modes of movement, of food, and how people react to food. And so this here is the reminders also that when we're doing provings, to furnish modalities accurately in our proving data. And then when we have cure cases, we can add to the modalities in the proving data. So the modalities of movement are very, very important.
So we finished this, right?
Yeah.
Now we will begin with
Well, we could do it next time with the Kwando. We do that next Thursday and finish up the whole thing. And let this one be a short one.
a short video, only
Yeah,
one part.
we can just do one part tonight. That'll be great. And then we can finish up.
We also need the meeting live for response to their question. Right. Better to, it's only a small part in
Your audio is just a little bit off. We missed a few words. But yeah, I think that if we close it now, we can just finish it up next
we
week.
will do only one part now.
Yeah.
And remaining will be continuing the Thursday. Right?
Sounds good.
Just thank our viewers and
Yep. Thank you
thank
for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy this series that we're doing on Bönninghausen's characteristic value of the symptom.
to subscribe and like us. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.